Hello, it's Sunday, April 26th. I forgot the date for a second. This is the second edition of Counterbalance with Mike Doran. And now my co-host, Gadi Taub. Hi, Gadi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
So I just let the cat out of the bag. You're now the co-host, is that right?
Yeah, I guess I am.
Yeah.
Do I need to get a tie?
No. Yeah, see, I'm going casual too.
You're without a tie. Yeah, that's
I want to.
terrible.
So we started last week. We had a pretty good response, but I was a little bit disappointed by a couple of things. But this is, I want to, before we start talking about politics and Israel and everything, let's talk about counterbalance a little bit. So first of all, you have, because we got such a good response, you and I are going to have a weekly conversation. But my original counterbalance idea was to do conversations with people about the Middle East in general. So I want to have conversations with other people. So you and I will have this Israel-America conversation every week. And I don't want to call that counterbalance. We should call it something else. I don't know what to call it. Do you have any ideas?
I thought Letter from Israel was too 19th century.
Yeah.
So, Michael Doran and Gadi Taub's Persian letters doesn't ring that good. I don't know. We should get it a name with something that points to current events, because if I understand you correctly, the idea is to give an American audience what they don't get from the American media, which is to say
exactly
the actual stories.
It's a supplement. It's like the broccoli that you should be eating, but you're not. I guess I should see it not as the broccoli, but as the ice cream.
I would see it as the main course, but because from my perspective, all you guys are just eating the broccoli. You don't get the meat.
Yeah, you don't get the meat. It's the falafel. It's the falafel in there. So one guy on Twitter suggested that we call it the whistleblowers, which I kind of like, because I was touting myself for a while as an anonymous whistleblower, but I don't think it totally fits with the idea. But anyway, so we'll figure that out in time. But we're going to be for the viewers at home, all 3 million of them. We're going to be doing this every week. Now, I had a few disappointments with this effort last week.
Right.
Well, one of them is that my wife walked by while I was trying to load it up on YouTube, and she saw me in one frame and you in another, and she said that you looked a lot better than me, and I didn't like that. Your color scheme. So I've changed. That's why I'm coming in a little darker this week, because you have those soft tones. I haven't figured out how to get those.
But we should get my wife's opinion too, and if she says you look better, then we're even. And
then we'll be even. Right.
Maybe your wife likes me better. I don't know. I never met her.
It could well be. I don't want to. This is as deep into my personal relationship as I want to go now. Yeah. Well, I will tell you. I turned 58 yesterday. It was my birthday, and my wife dug this thing up. I tweeted it out. This is my high school ID. I don't know if anyone can see it. You can see it on Twitter though. And it was 1977, and I had long flowing locks. And she said I was a very pretty girl when I was 15.
It looked like something out of the video for the song 74, 75. You know that song, The Connells?
No.
Put the link under our counterbalance. It's an amazing song.
Okay, who's the group?
The Connells, they're called.
By the way, do you know my favorite? One of my favorite groups I have is what? Here I'm saying one of my favorite groups. I can't think of Kaveret. Yo-Ya.
Oh, wow.
I love that song Yo-Ya from the. Whenever I hear it, it puts me in a great mood.
That was for all of us, for our childhood. We knew all that was the first Israeli rock group that was really cool. And we, like on field trips at school, everyone knew all the words to all the songs. We would just sing the whole, and Yoya included from beginning to end. The lyrics are very funny, but
no, they're hilarious. I learned some Hebrew from trying to translate that. Yeah, Donnie Sanderson is really clever, very smart guy.
Yeah.
But I'm nostalgic. You know, I have these nostalgias for eras that I never lived in. I'm nostalgic for the 1950s in America, but I wasn't born until '62, and I'm nostalgic for 1970s Israel. It's I don't know what the hell that means.
That you're a little older than me. I'm nostalgic for the 1970s, but you know, in the 1970s, well, first Likud came to power, and the 1970s changed everything in Israel, and the repercussions you can still see with the results of this election, because the whole thing in Israel is the Israeli system is not like an American system. It's a system of compromise because it's a coalition system. We don't have a president, and so the whole thing is built around having a large party in the middle, and sometimes having it leaning right and sometimes leaning left according to the preferences of the voters. But ever since '77, it's split right down the middle, and since then everything went haywire.
How old were you in 1977?
I was 12, and I remember the election because it was speaking of school field trips, it was our yearly field trip. And I was very excited, and I went to sleep, and I woke up at 6 a.m, and my mother told me that Begin won the elections, and I sat down on the floor and I cried. I really, because the message I got from my parents was that this is the end of the world. You know, this is
total end of the world. This is
Mussolini.
This is like Trump being elected in America.
Yeah, I wanted to say, imagine that someone told you Trump became president, something like that.
We had in my, sorry to interrupt you. Oh, by the way, a number of people wrote in comments last week that I interrupted you too much. So
my recollection was otherwise. I thought I spoke too much, but okay.
Well, I was, you know, I when I first heard that, I resolved not to interrupt you. Then my wife said you looked better than I did, so now I'm going to interrupt you more. So after Trump got elected, we had a I was going to tell a story, but I realize it's about a family friend. I can't tell this story, but let's just say people, we had a family friend crying in our kitchen, crying and believing that the world had ended because Donald Trump had been elected. And I mean, I don't understand these kind of reactions to political changes in democracies. It's never.
The message I got from my parents was that this is the end of Zionism, because Begin, in the eyes of the labor movement, is a fascist. Now, I would make the argument that portraying Begin as a fascist on the Israeli left in '77 was more plausible than describing Trump as Mussolini, which I've heard from Americans since he got elected. But the reaction was largely the same. It was completely emotional. And I have to tell you, my only knowledge of Trump, I was also, my knowledge came from the liberal media and The Apprentice. And I thought, wow, Americans just elected someone who is beyond the field, just a crazy guy. And then I talked to my friend Dan Shiftan, who sometimes someone says something that completely sobers you up.
Right.
And what Dan said in one sentence was, well, at least it can't be as bad as Obama. And I've been using that sentence ever since, because it breaks the wall. It breaks through the ice. I think Obama was a disaster in terms of world security and leading from behind, and Cairo's speech and the Iran deal and all the havoc he wreaked on the whole world by not leading. So it immediately, and ever since, and then we learned a lot about Trump. But that's the kind of thing when someone says to you that separates your emotions from your thoughts, and it went from there. And I guess now I am very fearful of a new administration coming in and resurrecting the Iran deal. That would be disastrous to the world, and maybe God forbid someone would um, return to the appeasement to China.
Let's talk a little bit about the, you got a new government in Israel, and there were some tears. A lot of tears were
Yeah,
a lot of tears were shed this
yeah.
week.
So
Benny
these people
Benny
are still
Gantz
sitting on the floor and crying.
Benny Gantz disappointed a lot of people. It's funny. I predicted this in print, actually, that Gantz was going to do this because there was no other alternative for him to do anything else. But people didn't see it. It's funny.
You see, and this is what, this is why I like to read you about Israel. You are far away and have a perspective. I didn't figure that out because I, to this day, don't believe there's such a thing as Benny Gantz. I think this is just an invention of PR people. And, every time he talked, he has nothing to say about anything. So, but in the end, I guess because the thing is, his party was going to drag him into an unbelievable political stunt, which is not viable. They were going to join forces with the anti-Zionist Arab Party but they didn't have enough members of Knesset for a government, even with the Arabs. So what they wanted to do was create a bloc that would be enough to take over the Knesset committees, so that you will have, counter to the way the Israeli system works, the government has to control the Knesset because otherwise it doesn't work. And they were going to do a hostile takeover and then use that in order to legislate Bibi out of existence, which is unbelievable. They had a series of laws that they kept calling, they said not personal, but then you see their communications and they call it the Bibi laws. They call it the Bibi laws, like on their WhatsApps we have inside the groups. So they were going to do that, and Benny Gantz, I think, couldn't bring himself to do this. And now it's Corona time, and I think both in America and in Israel, and maybe I'm just, this is wishful thinking, but at a time which is warlike, or a crisis on the scale of a war, you rally behind the commander-in-chief. And it's a mistake to try to take him down at any cost.
Right.
So if Pelosi is planning another impeachment, or if the ex-friends of Benny Gantz are going to try and do that here, the public is not going to forgive that.
Okay, but this agreement between blue and white and the Likud, it's a weird one. And I'm curious to get the Gadi Taub take on it. What are the things that are most engaging you in the politics of the moment?
There are two issues, and it immediately became clear that these are the two issues because they traded one for the other. One issue is annexation of the Jordan Valley. We don't call it annexation. On the right, we call it applying Israeli law because it was taken over from Jordan that occupied it illegally also. So it's contested territory. So we on the right, at least, are particular about the term. But this is, I can live with annexation too. And this is crucial because, I read this long, I think it was the longest tweet I ever read by Dan Shapiro, who was Obama's ambassador to Israel. And he's still with a peace camp, and he's still with a two-state solution, and I think that this is
that's important. I really want to talk about that. I want to. That issue is the thing that most interests me.
What would be your stance? What would you support annexation?
Oh, totally. Totally. Well, I have sort of two takes on it that work in my head simultaneously. I want to get to Dan Shapiro's tweet storm. I'd like to talk about that, but let me just say a couple things about it. From my perspective, the two-state solution is dead. It's unrealistic now, and I regard myself as a realist. That's a loaded term in America because there is both in Washington and in academia, there are people who call themselves foreign policy realists, and they're anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, or at least highly critical of Israel, the U.S.-Israeli relationship. That's Walton Mearsheimer in academia, and in Washington, it's the kind of traditional paleocons, James Baker, that sort of thing. James Baker, even Bob Gates.
When you get serious, the White House's number was what he said. Was that, when was that? In the 80s?
That was no, in the early 90s, and also don't F the Jews. They don't vote for us anyway. But that see, the foreign policy the school that calls itself realism is, in my mind, it's very idealistic. I mean, not idealistic. It's ideological. It's actually an ideology rather than the pragmatism that it purports to be. It made sense to say back, the logic back when it started was that if we're too close to Israel, we're going to alienate all of the Arabs. So that was the pragmatic concern. I never believed that being close to Israel was going to alienate all the Arabs. And now these days you can't make that argument anymore. But yet they still the Arabs no longer have the big problem with Israel that they did in the past. But the realists still have a problem with Israel. So that doesn't, clearly you can see that their problem was always with Israel and not with the pragmatic concerns that they purported to have. So this is why, see, I like Israel, I like Turkey. It doesn't make any sense from an ideological point of view, because the people who there's tensions between Israel and Turkey, and the pro-Israel community in Washington is very uncomfortable with Turkey and so on. But to me, those are our natural partners, obviously. Saudi Arabia, Israel, Turkey, that's the magic triangle that we should be working with, because the region's politics is all about states. And I think we just have to be very realistic and very, very clear-eyed about what's going on, and forget about the Palestinians for a second. I mean, forget about the fragmentation of Palestinian politics. Forget about the corruption in the Palestinian Authority. Forget about Hamas, which controls Gaza. Let's put Palestinian politics aside completely, and just look at Israel. In Israel today, there is a consensus against land for peace. Israelis don't want to give up territory anymore. Across the center right, center left, Israelis believe that Israel should have control of the Jordan Valley forever. That's Benny Gantz, right? So
and people don't know, Mike, this is Yitzhak Rabin.
Yes.
Yitzhak Rabin, in his last speech, it was a month before he was murdered, said that, hey, folks, he said this in the Knesset, where are you right? I mean, I put words in his mouth because he was very measured, but the speech says, we did not mean that we're going back to the 1967 borders. We can't give up control of the Jordan Valley. So it was a state minus always, because we can't, if with your permission, I could show a map so it's fresh in everyone's head.
My permission. You're now the co-host. You do what you want.
So here's a map of Israel. You see it on your screen too. Yeah. And this is the West Bank, and this is 9 miles. And I just read a book by ex-General Gershon Cohen, but that starts with the fact that in this long stretch of land is all the strategic assets of Israel, almost all of them. So if we give up control of the Jordan Valley, this is also a mountain, and this is the sea front. So this overlooks my house. I live here. You can shoot at my house, like a anti-tank rocket or something can reach the airport, which is here.
Sorry, so, where's your house is where?
Tel Aviv, here. Right here. And if you go to the West Bank, I drive through I drive through a road that goes here back on the way from Jerusalem, and from here you can see my house on a bright day. So here is what I think became crucial to Israelis, and maybe we should do this step by step another time, but I'll get right to the end now. my awakening about the prospect of a two-state solution was very gradual, and it took me a long time to move to where I am now, and where I would think that it's worth sacrificing all the other right-wing causes for annexation of the Jordan Valley. Because my crisis came in 2011 with the Arab Spring. And I was unhappy with the Arab Spring to start with. I didn't think it was the dawn of democracy. But what it showed us was much more earth-shaking, is that nation states are not viable entities in the Middle East. And I think it was your teacher, Bernard Lewis, who said, in the Middle East, there are 4 nation states: Israel, Egypt, Turkey, and Iran. All the rest, he said, are tribes with flags. And once you realize that the principle of political organization, which is the nation state, has collapsed around us, and then, you know, we saw Daesh, ISIS, spread around. And so there are these Sunni crazies and Shiite crazies, the Iranians and their proxies. And you say, how are we going to protect ourselves from this rolling lava of Arab chaos? Because no principle of order has survived on the other side of the border. Nothing. It's not Arab socialism, not pan-Arabism, not political Islam, nothing. There's just chaos. And we can't let this chaos spill to right over our international airport and Tel Aviv's metropolitan area. We can't.
Yeah, just like this is one of the, I said before that I have 2 thoughts in my head. One is it's just unrealistic. There's no way that the United States, the international community, is going to convince the Israelis not to annex the Jordan Valley. That's just unrealistic. But then there's a second point: is it's not in the American interest because of what you called the rolling lava. The professor in me wants to dispute with you a little bit about where the chaos is coming from and so on, but we can do that another time or maybe never. But I agree with you that there's a potential that it could come to the West Bank, and from an American point of view, that's going to damage our ally Israel, but it's also going to threaten our ally Jordan. And I realize that the Jordanian government is against the Israeli annexation of the Jordan Valley, and it has to be because you've got a very large percentage of Palestinians in Jordan, and
but that's the key, Mike. Has to be is not like really is. And I for me, the fact that I read Dan Shapiro's tweet, the fact that the Jordanians are going to be outraged, is that Jordanians are going to pay lip service to outrage, because if there is one thing that scares the Hashemites in Jordan, is the Palestinians. They have 60% Palestinians in their own country. The last thing they want is the chaos of the West Bank rolling into Jordan. It's a smaller scale than the larger chaos, but this is a threat to them. So if we create a land barrier that separates the Palestinian autonomy, which Bibi is aiming for, Netanyahu is aiming for, from Jordan, I think that they would protest formally, but they would be happy in their hearts.
See, well, that's how I look at it. I look at it as that the job of the United States is to stabilize a very volatile region, and there are 3 platforms from which it can primary platforms from which it can do this stabilization, and Israel, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, and that's the starting point for any thought. And what's happened with the whole Arab-Israeli peace process is that this is now a multinational endeavor, a kind of multinational enterprise that has a whole set of concepts have been advanced, and they've taken hold of people's minds, and they're completely disconnected from any notion of national interest and strategy. It's like we're all doing social work. This is how we're going to solve the conflict, and we've come up with this idea of how to solve the Arab-Israeli conflict, of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but it's not a realistic idea anymore. It seemed like a possibility in the 1990s, but reality has taught us that it's not going to happen. So we have to move on.
And most of all, the Palestinians have rejected it repeatedly. So when there was the most hostile administration to Israel, maybe since Eisenhower's Suez crisis, the Obama administration, Obama and John Kerry tried to bend Israel's hand, and they ended up dragging Israel to this tango to which the Palestinians never showed up.
Well, this brings us to the Shapiro tweet storm, because the job of Dan Shapiro he stopped being Obama's ambassador, but he remains, in my eyes, or at least this is how I see him and how I interpret his opinions. He remains the ambassador of the Democratic Party to Israel. And his job, the job of the ambassador, I don't want to pin this on Shapiro personally. Let's just put it, let's just talk about the Democrats. The Democrats have a problem now. And the problem is that they are increasingly hostile to Israel. Their base, the progressive base of the Democratic Party, is openly hostile to Israel. The progressive base is embracing Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, and you see it. You see it increasingly. You saw Bernie Sanders was very, very critical of Israel. And you saw it in the Obama administration now, but Obama didn't openly admit that he had progressive views toward Israel. So he hid it. And so, I mean, a good example of hiding it is UN Resolution 2334, which he orchestrated as he walked out the door. Now, if you talk to former Obama officials, they say, "Oh, we had nothing to do with that," but it's a lie. The 2334. First of all, for those who aren't following this so closely, the important thing about 2334 is it tried to make the 4 June 1967 lines into an international boundary, which it never was. These were armistice lines from 1949, from the 48 war. They were not international boundaries, and so 2334 was going to make Israeli control of the Golan Heights, any part of the West Bank, as illegal in international law. It was a huge shift in American policy, and it was orchestrated by Obama, but he presented it to the world as if the U.S. just abstained, yeah. and it just acquiesced in the will of everyone else. So, New Zealand, which played a big role in pushing the thing through, right? New Zealand, the opinion of New Zealand really just overwhelmed everyone, and we couldn't disagree with New Zealand. I mean, how could we do that? So it's nonsense. So, but they need to do that. They need to play that game because first of all, America is a pro-Israel country. The majority of Americans, Democrats and Republicans, or people who are going to vote for Democrats and Republicans. I'm not sure if the majority of Democrats even are now continue to support Israel. I don't know where the numbers are these days. But anyway, America is a pro-Israel country. And secondly, the Jews are an incredibly loyal and important constituency for the Democratic Party, and they make up a huge percentage of the donor class of the Democratic Party, and a significant.
And so I think what happened with that is, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. But what happened with that is that in order not to be openly anti-Israeli, American liberal Jews have colluded, if I can use that overused word, with the Democratic Party to create a theoretical Israel, which they would in theory support, which is the Israel, which is not the realistic Israel. So
that is exactly what I was trying to say and where I was headed. Super. But you got there ahead of me. So yes, so the job of Dan Shapiro the ambassador of the Democratic Party, is to do two things. He tries to tell American Jews who are worried about the way the Democratic Party is turning away from Israel, that the policies of an Obama or of a Bernie Sanders or of a Biden administration, the Biden is bending over backwards now to tell all the Bernie Sanders voters that they're going to be happy with him. He's going to be the most progressive president ever. So it's the job of Dan Shapiro to tell potential Jewish voters in America who are Zionists, don't worry about this. Don't worry about this rhetoric. Everything is going to be fine. And at the same time, his job is to tell the Israelis to put the brakes on. Don't go too far in any direction that is going to cause tension between the Democratic Party and Israel. So, part of that, what he's doing in that tweet storm there is he's saying to Gantz, "Oy vavoy lecha," don't you dare
do that.
Don't you dare go for annexation, because that will cause friction between the Democratic Party and the U.S. And so the line over here among Middle East experts is that the Israelis are destroying the two-state solution. This is what's happening. The Israelis are destroying it, and Gantz is making a huge mistake in doing this. And in my opinion, what Gantz needs to say, now you say he doesn't exist, Gantz, but I'm going to assume that he does. What he needs to do is he needs to speak brass tacks with the Americans, with the Democrats, and he has to say, you guys have to bring your views about the Middle East into alignment with reality.
I think that he is going to be in a tough spot because in the negotiations, what was the alleged first when the Trump plan was unveiled, Gantz immediately said he would support it, but then Kahol Lavan, his party, was an enterprise of trying to harness the center to the extreme left, which was still thinking of the two-state solution, or at least some form of unilateral partition. And Gantz was in a bind because as you say, it's consensus about the Jordan Valley, but it became now an issue between right and left. So he immediately said that we will annex the Jordan Valley, but only with international backing. And international backing is a code word for letting the Europeans and the Palestinians have a veto. And the Europeans are even worse than the Democratic Party in America. They are downright hostile, and for different reasons. For Europeans who have betrayed the Jews so badly in the Second World War, it's a relief now to think of the Jews as the new Nazis. So they like the occupation in a way. So it's a topsy-turvy. I once said this, and it's rude to say to Germans because they don't actually say that. But at least on the left fringe of the German left, they almost say that the Jews are the new Nazis. And the second muted part of the sentence is, it's shame we didn't finish the job. And we should have killed them. They're Nazis. They don't say that, of course. No, I don't want to say libelous things on the left. But Europe, for the European conscience, it's comfortable that the Jews are now guilty
but I
of the
think
occupation.
I spend a fair amount of time talking to European diplomats, and I noticed over the last year or two that the belief in the two-state solution as the way to stabilize the Middle East and in Europe, I'm talking about among the diplomats, the people who follow it closely, the real conviction has disappeared. I think everyone recognizes that the chance of bringing about an Israeli-Palestinian peace is extremely small, non-existent.
Yeah, but if you see that, like Channel 13, who pretends to be objective, but is really very left-wing, their political commentator, Barak Ravid, has a tweet every 2 days of someone else threatening Israel, don't go for annexation. The European Union will be very angry. Germany will be very angry. The Democratic Party will be very angry.
Well, this is why you and I exist here on this YouTube channel, because we're going to cut through, you and I, the I don't know what to call it, the fictions that govern U.S.-Israeli relations, because the Israeli left needs America in order to constrain the Israeli right. This is, by the way, this is a Middle Eastern phenomenon. Everyone in the Middle East wants America to beat up their domestic enemy with America's back. And so,
Yeah.
that's every left-wing voter in Israel fantasizes, dreams, hopes that America will constrain the right-wing beast that they themselves can't constrain, right? And then in Washington, the fiction is that there is still an Israeli left that's going to carry out a two-state solution. Now that we're still the Democratic Party is trying to hold Israeli-Palestinian relations in the place they were in 1996, and they're not even 1996. That as you mentioned, that in 1996. Rabin's view of what Israeli-Palestinian relations should be was pretty much what we're getting with the,
by 1996 he was dead.
Yeah, but we out of the Clinton parameters in 2001. You know, we have this vision of the two states living side by side in peace and so on, and this is what everyone has been trying to work towards for 2 decades. But it's not going to work. It's simply not going to work.
And it plays, you know, and I hate to be in this situation with American Jews sometimes, where they want, it's the same, it's the reverse side of what you say. They want an Israel that's comfortable for their conscience, that they can endorse for their American politics, for their politics about America.
Exactly.
And we are not here, and I keep saying this, and you know, it ends up sounding rude, but we are not going to change our policy in order to fit your domestic interest. We are a separate sovereign country. And this has been going on forever, because, you know, since the roots of the Zionist movement in America is that Israelis have been coming and say, this is our country, just give us your money and we know what to do. While Americans have been saying to Israel, hey, we paid for this, so you better do what we say. And this has got to stop. But I want to mention one more point. I see we won't have time to get into the other side. I'll just mention it in a minute, the legal part of the coalition agreement. But from the Israeli side, and this is very important, we have a very large Arab minority. And there is a war, a cultural war about the future of this minority. And their leadership, their parliamentary leadership, is trying to making an effort to exacerbate the relations between minority and majority and teach Israeli Arabs to think of themselves as Palestinians, and therefore to blur the green line, the border between Israel and the West Bank, and saying we are one people. So Israel's nightmare is that the Arab Israelis, which have been Israelized, which have been and many of which say about themselves that they are patriots, to prevent the dream of the radicals to join Israeli Arabs with Palestinians in the territories, with Palestinians in Jordan, because this will put an end to any form of nation state in this region, and it will be another Lebanon for everyone. So it's the best interest of the Arab minority too. And this is interesting because, you know, some of the plans for peace said, hey, there are Arab regions of Israel. So if we have a friendly Palestinian state, why don't we move the border so that some of these Arabs are annexed to Palestine? And guess who protested the most against this?
The leadership.
The Arabs living there, because the leadership.
I misunderstood what you were saying. Yeah.
The leadership keeps calling Zionism colonialism,
Yeah.
but when you ask the actual people, they prefer Zionist colonialism to Arab tyranny, and they're right. And they're right, because, you know, we look at the Arab leaders here protesting against the government and think, if this were an Arab government, you would not dare protest. You would be in jail if you tried.
So you said, are we about out of time? I actually lost track of the time here. How much time we
Yeah,
got left?
we are out of time. Like we have a few minutes.
So what you said there was one other issue, and we'll just put it on the agenda, and then we'll come to it some other time.
Yeah, because the original question you asked was about the coalition, and I said there are two issues. One is the annexation of the Jordan Valley. The other is sovereignty, because, and this is we can have a whole conversation about that, because Israel has the wildest judiciary in the democratic world, maybe with the exception of India, and there I don't know enough about the politics, but our judiciary exercises, in its own view, authority over everything, and it was going to prevent this coalition government from forming by changing the law. So the two big issues between left and right were annexation and the judiciary. And why the judiciary? Because I don't want to use conspiratorial terms, but this is a book, by the way, by a left-wing liberal called Professor Manny Mautner, who wrote, and I'll just mention it shortly and we can talk about it at some other time. He said the left lost the elections in '77. That's when I cried on the field day trip. And ever since, it was unable to win at the ballot, with few exceptions. And what it did is it moved into the judiciary and started creating the doctrine of judicial supremacy. And nowhere is the judiciary so powerful as it is in Israel, and to the point where many of us don't think that elections matter all that much.
You know, this is so fascinating, because of course there's a real parallel to what's going on over here. The combination of the press, the permanent bureaucracy, the legal institutions, and the Democrats all kind of forming a block against the Republican-dominated institutions is that are responsive to the voters. Right?
So this is why we're here, Mike, and we're gonna counterbalance all that.
Yeah, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. We're certainly gonna do it with regard to the Middle East connection. But what's fascinating about it, I didn't see this at all clearly when Trump got elected, is that we talked about this last time. I mean, there really is a globalism. Globalism is an international system. This isn't just. It isn't just a polarizing term that's used in a politicized term in American domestic politics. There really is a whole system. I had this fascinating conversation. Maybe we can end after I tell you this. I was in Turkey a couple months ago, and I was talking to this Turkish professor, and she said, "Oh, I was at a conference," and she came up and introduced herself, and we started talking. And she said, "I really, really wanted to talk to you." She said, "I follow you on Twitter, and I was very eager to meet you." And I assumed that because I like Turkey and because I'm making the argument all the time that Turkey is a very good ally of the United States, and I'm the only guy in Washington making that argument. Or I'm one of two guys in Washington making that argument. I assumed that she wanted to talk to me for that reason, and when I mentioned that, she said, no, that's not it. I said, well, why did you want to talk to me? And she said, because I support Donald Trump. And I thought, why is a Turkish professor supporting Donald Trump? And it was the same thing. She said, because I'm anti-globalist. And she said that we have this problem here of the press, the career bureaucrats, the deep state, as the term came from Turkey, against the will of the people. And she, she's not a diehard Erdogan supporter. She's anti-Erdogan, in other words. But she connected it in her mind between what's going on in the EU versus Brexit, Trump versus the media, It never occurred to me in a million years that the message of Donald Trump would resonate internationally in any way. But actually it does.
Oh, I think that from the perspective of the Middle East, when he pulled out of the Iran deal, we realized, and even when he attacked in Syria, people forget that he attacked Syria after the use of gas. We can talk another time about the whole wrong-headed conception. Obama for me is the Edward Said president. He's the first Edward Saidian president. So leading from behind and the arrogance of power, that's a bad philosophy for the Middle East. So here, this is a region of crazies. So we want a responsible power that is able to restrain the crazies. And the fact is, liberal Americans loved Obama because he's so soft-spoken and such a gentleman and such a nice character. But being nice is the wrong thing for a leader who's going to impose order on the Middle East. You have to be a thug, and people have to be afraid of you. And if you draw red lines and then go back on yourself, and then invite Putin to control Syria, people just think that they can just disregard you. And this is what happened.
When you say he's the Edward Said president, you know about the Obama Said tape, do you not?
Mm-hmm.
So
No.
Where was this? I'm gonna get the details wrong, but the LA Times got a hold of a tape. I think it was at the farewell dinner for Rashid Khalidi at
Columbia.
at Chicago, when he was going off to Columbia. He was going off to Columbia, so they had a farewell dinner, and at the dinner were Obama and Edward Said, and the thing was taped. And the LA Times back in was it during the 2012? No, it must have been during the 2008 election. The LA Times described the tape and who was there at the dinner, and the LA Times quoted from the tape, but refused to release the tape because they just quoted a line or two, but people wanted to know, well, what was everything that was said there, and I can't remember the rationale that the LA Times gave for keeping the tape in a safe in their offices, so it's still there. This friend of mine,
wow,
a friend of mine, Roger Simon, you may know him. He was launching a little crusade online for a while to free the tapes from the press, because but this is somebody quit that the job of the press these days is to not report the news that's embarrassing to Democrats, and this is what they're hiding the tape. I would like to get that tape released. I'm just curious. I mean, at this point, it doesn't matter anymore, but I'm curious.
We're out of time. And
right.
We didn't get to half what we planned. That's our problem.
It's because I didn't interrupt you enough.
No, last time when you did interrupt me, you bounced between so many subjects. Anyway, it's a good sign, Mike, because I think I can open brackets, we call it in Hebrew. Do you say that in English?
No.
Open a footnote, or I think there are many topics we should have a whole conversation on. And one of them is the Palestinian refusal to peace. So write that down as my request for a counterbalance full discussion.
Oh, okay, but that bores me, honestly. I'll do
Seriously?
it. Yeah, it seriously bores me. No, seriously. There's certain things that bore me. Egyptian politics bores me, and Palestinian politics bores me.
So I need 12 minutes for that.
Listen,
I don't think it will bore your audience.
Okay. You're the co-host. You're the co-host. You can force me to talk about these things. It's fine. I'll do it.
Okay.
All right. So see you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.